And so, yeah, I'm going to go and reproduce the tiles that we see here. So there's a few things that I want to look at before I start generating this in terms of even just for reference images. There are things like the fact that I can see when I look at this, I can actually see a lot of the specularity or the reflectivity in these tiles. So if you look at the series of tiles above the word shepherd here, I can see a couple of things. A, I can see the reflection of the light. This looks to me like there are fluorescent bulbs somewhere in the near vicinity of this wall. And I know what a fluorescent bulb looks like, and I can see how broken the reflection is. That gives me an idea as to both the surface quality of these things, how flat they are, what their shape is like. I can also see that the highlight right at the edge here, right along this area here, looks to break up into a bunch of little tiny dots. That's telling me that these tiles are not perfectly smooth. You can see that really nicely right here. These tiles aren't perfectly smooth. There's little tiny granular bumps on them. I can also see that there's a highlight on the top of this. So that makes it look like this surface comes out, dips in, and then goes back out that way. And so if I look at that, that's kind of what I'm seeing here. They look like they're a little bit caved in, a little concave along their surface. I've also got enough variation in looking at this at color variance, as well as the color of the grout as well. So I can kind of get a lot of input from what's going on in this one image. So that's why I'm going to use this. It has a lot of the values that I'm looking to achieve. So I'm going to move this over to my other monitor here, and we're just going to keep that as reference over there. Step number one is going to be switching over to the library, which is the collection of nodes inside of Designer that I'm going to be using in order to recreate this material. Here, there's a little search window where we can search up different things, or we can actually go through the list here and pull out things as we need. I typically have a series of nodes that I use more often than others, and that's kind of what I'm going to lean on here. So the first thing that I want to do, and this is kind of the same with all artwork, you want to start with the biggest, broadest shapes, and then slowly kind of whittle your way down to the smaller and more intricate shapes. And so that's what I'm going to do. We'll start with like maybe just the actual bricks. So I'm going to go grab a shape node. I'm just going to Google, or not Google, I'm going to search the word shape up here, and I will pull one of these shape nodes into my graph. Now, in the bottom here, we have two viewports, one where we can see our material as it exists with its outputs generated onto a cube, and this is one instance per face. So that's what we're going to see here. Our shape node currently is set to be, this is the properties panel here. So whatever I currently have selected, it is going to show me the properties here. And if I double click on the background, it'll actually give me the properties for the material itself. So I'm going to go back onto the shape. Currently I have this set to a square, and I'm going to show you something really interesting here. I'm just going to bring the scale of the square down, and using Control D, I'm going to duplicate this node. And on the duplicate, I'm going to change its shape from square to disc, which is just a disc. So if you look at this now, we have a square shape and a circle shape. Now, the reason I've got two of these nodes, and I want to show you the way that these things behave, is that if I double click a node, I see its preview in the 2D view, and I get its parameters over here. However, if I single click a node, it doesn't add it to the 2D viewport, but it still does give me the ability to go and manipulate it. So if I go and add a blend here to blend these two things together, and we'll just go and subtract, and I'm going to make the square quite a bit smaller so we can actually see it being subtracted from the circle. So the reason that you would do this is that I can go and select my blend, somewhere where I would want to play with my blending mode. And then I can go and select the square. So now I can actually see I see the outcome, but I can now change the scale of the square. So this gives me the ability to see how it's affecting something later down the chain while playing with something that I have selected and not just seeing a square here. And so that's kind of how that works. So I'm going to go back to my shape node. And instead of a square, I'm going to switch this to the one called brick. And if I go zoom in here to show you the difference, I'm going to look at the corner here. You can see this is a per pixel or a pixel accurate representation of a square. There is the square. And if I go to brick, well, nothing happens. What is happening is that when I'm on square, the settings that I have are scale, which is how big that square is, size X and size Y, which is going to stretch it vertically or horizontally. If I go to brick, however, along with scale and size, I now have something called pattern specific. And this is a property that is specific to whatever pattern you have selected. With the brick selected, what this is going to do is as I increase this value, it's going to start softening the edge of this, essentially making it look anti-alias. It's going to start blurring it. And it's going to make it look like it's beveled a little bit. So it gives you the ability to kind of soften these corners. As it turns out, that's kind of exactly what I want inside of our brick. I'm going to go and make this thing full scale again. And that's not too bad. We're going to get this kind of rounded edge on our bricks. Cool. The next thing that I want to do is I want to add that concavity that exists in here. And so this is going to be adding some kind of a curvature to it. Now, in looking at the images, it doesn't look like that concavity exists too much on the sides, only on the top and bottom, where that warp is. But I'm going to put it on the sides as well because I want to be able to rotate this brick once I start putting it into a tile generator. So in order to add a darker core of this, where it kind of fades in a little bit, I'm just going to use another square here, another shape generator, and I'm going to bring the scale of this thing down. I would like to invert its values. I want this to be dark in the middle and light on the outside. So if I go to my search and I look for invert, I'm going to invert grayscale. Now, this is a grayscale image. We can do that. Now, if I bring in invert color in here, you can see that there are yellow nodes on the color values. Okay, so these are 8-bit per channel color nodes. This is what the C8 means here. The L16 is linear color 16. And so this is a black and white image that is 16 bits per channel. So these are actually higher quality than the color ones, but they are single channel. So they get black and white. I can't plug in a black and white to a color node. Nor can I do the opposite. Nor can I plug in a color node to a black and white one. There are some switching values that we can use here that will turn a color node black and white or turn a black and white node into color. And I'll show you those when we get to them. So here's my square. I would also like to blur this. So I'm going to go to blur. I'm going to use the blur high quality grayscale. Again, this is a grayscale image, so it makes sense that I'm going to be doing that. And let's turn up the intensity and the quality. Now my intensity hits 16 and I'm kind of blocked out. I can't go any further than that. I do want it blurred further than that. So one of the really nice things with these sliders is that some of them allow you to type in a value higher than what's here. So if I type in 64, that will give me now a 64 as the level of blur, and I can actually bring it all the way up to 128. So it gives me the ability to kind of really adjust this a lot. So I'm going to get to a point where this has a really nice kind of faded look to it. We're going to bring this one forward, and I'll bring a blend out that's going to blend these things together. Now, I spoke a moment ago about the yellow nodes and the gray nodes. So yellow one is a color one, and a gray one is a black and white one. But on images or nodes like the blend, we have a half yellow, half gray. This is an indication that you can either plug in a black and white or a color node in here. Now, when you see one with a dot, it means that its dependency is based off the other one that's there. So if I plug a gray node in here, I need to plug a gray node in here. If I were to plug something that has color on it in there, it's going to turn my grayscale one red, saying, no, 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 no. You can't blend two different types of images together. And so that means that we have to make sure that the wires going into a blend match. The blend has blending modes, just like you would see in Photoshop. We have copy, add linear, subtract, multiply, add sub, lighten, darken, switch, soft light, overlay, screen. We've got a whole bunch of different things here. Now, what I would like to do is I would like to darken the core of this thing, darken the center, and that's what this image is for. And so I'm going to do this as a multiply. So if I go and switch this to a multiply, my values will start getting darker. Now, in conjunction with the blending mode, we also have a slider that adjusts the opacity of the top input. In this case, the opacity turns down the opacity of my shape node. This is not what I want. I actually like how dark and the look of this thing. I actually want to turn down the opacity of the gradient here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring my shape node down. I'll bring the blend down, and I'm going to invert the order. This now gives me the ability to play with how dark that center core is. Now, most of the time while you're generating shapes and things like this out of these nodes, you're not getting to see it in 3D. This is not plugged into any outputs. And it can be really hard to tell when just looking at a single image like this, is that doing what I want it to do? And so most of the time when I'm working, you're going to want to plug this into something so that we can actually see what it's doing. So I've plugged it into the normal map here of our image, which is going to be generating a normal map of this. If I double click on this, I can see its end result. In this case, the normal map doesn't have enough intensity. And so I can go and increase the normal map. And I'm going to bring this up to, let's try 8. So that's not too bad. If I go and take a look at this, I can kind of see how those two things are being affected. We're not seeing that concavity here, but we don't have a lot of reflectivity in this. So maybe if I go to my uniform color plugged into the roughness and I lower this down, we'll be able to see that concavity as it appears. Okay, we're getting there. Now, instead of this being just one tile, I would like to actually make multiple tiles out of this. And so we're going to go and create what is called a tile generator. Now you'll notice there's a lot of different ways that you can tile things inside of Designer. I'm just going to be using the really simple tile generator to do this. So I'm going to pull this guy in and I'm going to plug my input into the input and plug this into the normal. The tile generator has its own specific input. And right now, the tile generator is trying to generate its own brick. And that is cool, but not what I'm after. And in fact, the problem with this is that I wouldn't be able to make these kinds of levels of changes to a simple brick. The brick that I have here, I'm only just going to have its properties. And so we're going to go and change the brick to image input. And that's going to bring in whatever I made out of my image. Now, in looking at this, I can see that the normal map is actually way too strong right now. So I can go back into my normal and I can reduce this down until it's far more subtle in terms of what it's generating. Now, it is important that in turning down the strength of this normal here, anything else that I add to this is also going to get subdued by that. So it may be in my best interest to actually add a levels to this. I'm going to go and put this back at 3. And on this node, I'm going to use a levels. So if you select a node inside of your graph, there's a whole list of more commonly used nodes up here, each one a different color. The levels is the green one that has a little graph on it. If you have a node selected and you just click on one of these things, it'll actually add it to the chain. So you don't have to go and wire these things up together. And I can now see where the black and white values are on this thing. And so what I want to do is I just kind of want to settle this down a little bit. So I'm going to bring the output blacks and the output whites up until I kind of get the same effect. I'm just kind of nerfing the normal map a little bit. Now the normal itself is still being generated at a level of 3, but now the input that it's getting is far less contrast than what there was in the original image. And so this is a nice level of control that we can use to manipulate each property. So if I wanted to go and add cracks and broken elements to some of these tiles, they're not going to get subdued by the normal. Okay, so far so good. The tiles in the image are actually not square. And so in my tile generator, I'm going to go change the amount. We're going to do 10 and let's try 6. Okay, I like that. 10 and 6 works quite well. I'm going to go and find the spacing. This is going to be under size, and I'm looking for the interstice. So this is the gap in between the tiles. And the larger you make this gap, the more gap there is in between your tiles. So you can actually make tiles that are fairly spaced apart. And what I want to do is I just want to make the interstice wide enough that I can see where that grout is going to be. So 0.05 looks pretty good. I'm going to go and do slightly more in Y. And again, that's because there are more tiles in Y than there are in X. Now, in looking at this, I can see that the roundness here, the curve that I'm getting on my shape, is a little too much. So if I go and pull down that pattern specific a little bit, I can pull it back a little so it looks a little bit more like the actual bricks. And I'm also going to go into my opacity here and pull down that concavity even more. It doesn't need to be that prominent. Okay. The next thing that I want to look at here is the angle at which these things are traveling. So if I go and get my horizon to line up in these bricks, what you're going to notice happen is that the horizon runs perfectly linear across here. And that's not the way it looks in these tiles, right? These tiles would have been laid by some kind of builder who would have smeared concrete on the wall and stuck a tile to it and held it in place while it dries a little bit, and then, you know, done something else and moved on. So I kind of want to add some imperfections to this. Right now, it's completely linear. Every single brick is at exactly the same point. Every single brick is completely horizontal. And every brick is completely flat with the surface too. It's making a mirrored surface, even with that little wallop that I put in there. And so what I want to do is I want to go and add some randomness to this, a little bit of chaos to this. So first, with the tile generator, I'm going to go into the rotation of my tiles. So there's two places where we can handle rotation. The first is in the pattern. There's a rotation in here, rotation random. As I bring this up and down, you can see that nothing happens. The reason for that is that what it's rotating is this image here, the input. And doesn't matter if I rotate this 90 degrees or 180, it's always looking exactly the same. The other rotation that I have is under rotation, and it rotates each of the tiles. So as I go into rotation and I turn up the random, you can see that the tiles start spinning around each other randomly. Now the idea is to go and give this a slight skew, a very low number. Let's try 0.005, so that we just start getting a little bit of improperly laid tiles. Now that even looks a little too much to me. I'm seeing some very crooked tiles. And so I'll go and maybe even pull that down half. So let's go from 5 to 2.5. And that's a little bit better. Again, it still reads as being a flat wall, but I can see a couple of places where they're just not completely linear. Okay, so that's our first bit of imperfection. I would also like the tiles to lean in and out, so that some of them point up slightly, and some of them point left slightly, and some of them point right slightly. So what we're getting right now, black is low down or recessed, and white is pushed up or high. In order to make something lean forward or down, we need the top of the tile to be brighter than the bottom of the tile. That's going to lean it closer towards us. To do that, we can use a gradient. So if I grab a gradient, I'm just going to use this linear gradient here. You can see that this has, if I zoom out, the top closer to us and the bottom further from us. So, cool. I could use this if I go and take this chain and back it up a little bit, and I can add this to the chain. So I'm going to take the linear gradient, I'm going to take the blend, and I'll add another blend. This blend is going to be the gradient. Well, maybe move this above. And the blend is going to be a multiply, adding the gradient to the brick. So now we have a brick that leans from top to bottom. I may also want to add a levels so that I can control the gradient and maybe make sure that it doesn't completely disappear into black and isn't quite as bright white as it needs to be. So we just have a softer gradient. So cool. Now every brick is leaning down, so that's not good. In the tile generator, again, under the pattern area, I have a rotation. We'll just go to our random rotation, and as I go and move this up, we're now spinning the tiles randomly. So cool, now I'm getting a little bit of a skew in different directions. Again, just slightly imperfect. Again, I can also use the opacity to pull down just how strong that gradient is. So far, so good. The one problem I have is that the tiles are only leaning at perfect 90-degree angles. They're either leaning completely to the right, completely up, completely to the left, or completely down. This one is down. And so what I'd like to do is actually give them a skewed rotation as well. To do that, I'm going to edit the gradient. So if I pull the gradient back, I'm going to add a transform node. Now I'm not going to click on it. This time I'm going to drag it in. And that's because I don't want it in this chain. Here, I'm going to take the gradient and I'm going to rotate it holding shift 45 degrees. And then using shift and scaling, I can move it out until I get a 45-degree gradient. Now, I can take my levels and duplicate the levels so that I'm doing the same order of operation to the 45-degree gradient. And then what I want to do is I want to duplicate my tile generator. The reason for this is that right now, we only have horizontal ones. So if I take this and duplicate it, I need to duplicate the blend as well. And I'm just going to go and sub out the inputs. So there's the blend. This one's going to go with the top line here. And instead of the levels going into the top here, the levels will go into the top here. Now, my tile generator has 45-degree angle rotations. We'll move the levels forward. And what I can do now is start blending these two things together. In order to do that, I want to be able to choose one way or the other which tile gets made. And to do that, we can actually create another tile generator. I'm going to kill the input node here. And I'm actually going to use the input node before we put our gradient into it. So this is going to give me just white and black tiles. This is actually the separation between grout and tile. So this is actually a mask I'm going to use at some point down the road. I'm going to put that up above and we'll come back to it later. And I'm going to duplicate it down here in order to make the one that we're going to use now. So this one, I want to actually have some way of choosing A or B. I'm going to use a blend, and we're going to pick A or B based off our tile. Now, this is actually just swapping the grout out from these images, as the black and white image is just defining those. But if I go in the tile generator here under the area called color, I can increase what's called a luminance mask. And when I do this, we are going to get variants of tile color here, some that are black, some that are white, and some that are every shade in between. And what that does to the node is it actually starts blending our nodes together. So we're going to have some that are slightly skewed up and to the left, and some that are slightly skewed to the right and down. It's blending based off these nodes here. So if I show you this node and I play with the opacity, you can see how that works. It's just skewing them ever so slightly in a different way. Now, if we just use this as the input to the levels instead, we're now going to get tiles that are slightly skewed in different directions. So if I look at my highlight here, I can see that the horizon kind of bounces around from tile to tile. Cool. We've now got a decent tile setup going. Again, I've got this other node that I pulled out here from our graph that we're going to use. At this point, it would be nice to go and start adding some color into this thing. So right now, the only thing we've really done is played around with the normal map. And in fact, the node that goes into the normal map generator is also what I'm going to use in my height. So I can actually just delete that node and put this in here. Now, in order to clean this up a little bit, I often will bring these guys down and bring the height up here. Since these two things are more closely related than anything else, it makes sense to kind of have them together. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to pull these down again, and I'm going to bring the ambient occlusion up. And that's because the ambient occlusion is also going to be generated from the height. Here, I'm going to do a search for occlusion, and I'll grab the ambient occlusion node and put it down here. This is going to replace the uniform color, which is no longer needed. And this, if you take a look, the input here is labeled as height. So if I pull my height into that node as well, it'll start generating an ambient occlusion node for this. That's not too bad. The ambient occlusion looks a little big, so I'm just going to pull it back a little bit, make it a little bit softer. Okay, as I said, we want to go and do some coloring here. To do this, I'm going to do something a little interesting with the software. So I'm actually going to just go and dock this here on one side. And I'm going to pull the image here onto the other side of my canvas. The reason for this is that I'm going to go and use the uniform color that's currently plugged into my base color. I'm just going to go and pull this up here. And instead of using this uniform gray, which is currently what's being applied to all the bricks, I would actually like to use some of the color from the wall. Now, these uniform colors are kind of cool in that you can actually go and use the eyedropper. And unlike most packages, the eyedropper can actually leave the software. And so I can actually go and eyedropper colors from anywhere. Like I can go grab this blue color and I get blue tiles. It can also sample the interface. This is actually just looking at whatever color is currently lighting up the pixels on your screen. This is a really neat eyedropper. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and grab something in kind of a middle tone for these tiles. You can see that already that's pretty close to the color. And then I'm going to duplicate this node. And I'm going to use the eyedropper again. And I'm going to go and grab something in a darker range for this color. Maybe that up there. The reason for this is that I would like to be able to not just have a single flat color on my tiles. I'd like to actually be able to blend them a little bit. I'll move these forward a little bit here. And let's take a look at how we're going to blend them. So what I'd like is some kind of a noise generator. Now the noise generators for the most part inside of Designer are all procedural. They're all mathematically based. And there's a whole bunch of different ones here that you can choose from. There's some called dirt and some called cells and some called clouds. There's a whole bunch of grunge ones down here. There's a liquid, messy fibers. There's all kinds of things that you can grab. Now, what I'm looking for in these tiles is actually just kind of imperfections in the pigment that was added to the tiles when they were made. So I'm just kind of looking for something. I'm going to grab this Clouds 2. I'm just kind of looking for something like this, just kind of swirly kind of color type thing. So cool. With that, I can go and add a blend. So I'll grab my uniform color and click blend. And I'll use that as the top color so that I can arrange this the way that I've got it. And now you can see that what I'm getting out of that clouds is that wherever it's dark, we're getting the dark color, and wherever it's light, we're getting the light color. And so now the tiles are actually getting a little bit of randomness in their colors, a little bit of organic nature to the way that they're created. Now, there is kind of a problem with this. Right here, I have this dark splotch. And if I look at the tiles here where that dark splotch is, it kind of leaves one tile and goes on to another. If I were to go and increase the contrast in this so that you could see it, you're going to see essentially what is noisily one. Here, let's go to the uniform color, and I'm just going to make this bright red so you can see this. So this is what's going on, is we're getting that imperfection in the tile manufacturing is leaving tile A and entering tile B. Like, you can actually see that it's a large image spread across multiple tiles. So that's not something I want. That isn't very realistic. These tiles, with their imperfections, it would kind of be tile by tile by tile. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and warp this image, this clouds that I'm using, in order to make it feel a little bit more random per tile. I have my tile generator here, which has random black and white values. And if I go grab a node called Directional Warp, what this is going to allow me to do is it's going to allow me to take an image, such as our clouds, and it's going to allow me to warp this thing in a specific direction. I'm going to take the intensity from the Luminance map, which is random per tile. And what this is going to do is it's going to move those tiles, that amount in the map, multiplied by this amount. I'm just going to bring this up to like some crazy weird number. Whoop, that's too much. Let's do 100. So this is going to move the pattern on each of these tiles that amount. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go use the angle to kind of just shift it around so that we end up where the pattern now doesn't appear to continue from one tile to the next. And if I do get it somewhere, like I can see it is repeating from these two tiles here, I can kind of just shift around this angle until it gets to that point. So the idea is to set my intensity here at such a point where I don't really get too much in terms of distortion in here. So I'm going to go set this to, let's try 5. 5 does not appear to be enough. 10. So 10 too, I can still see it, right? Absolutely showing from one node to the next. Now, as it looks, these two nodes are really close in color. And so we might just end up with something there that is going to happen that way. So if I go and sub this out now, we're going to get a shifting in that. Let's bring this up to 20. And there, that's a little bit better. And the idea is to try and get this to a point where we are not seeing that pattern reproduce from tile to tile. Just so it looks a little bit more organic. So with that, I can go and take this color here, and we'll go and eyedropper this guy. And then we'll go into the color, and I'm just going to darken it in this direction here. There we go. So cool. We've got a highlight color. We've got a shadow color. We have got them blended together and spread across the bricks. It's also going into the grout, which is no good. And so we are going to have to eliminate the grout from this. Again, I want to kind of keep this in a way that I can organize it here and I can see where things are going. I don't like when wires go in behind other nodes. And so I'm going to try and make sure that the wires kind of cross each other instead of going in behind something like that. Just so, again, it makes it a little bit more legible. Brilliant. I'm going to go and eliminate the grout from this image here. So we have our blend color, we have uniform, and we have a clouds. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take these 3 nodes, the 2 colors and the blend, and I'm going to duplicate them, and I'll use this to generate the the grout color. So I'm just going to put them above here. And the grout color is going to be quite a bit darker in range. And also quite a bit more desaturated. And it's a lot more granular. So in order to do my blend here, I need another node here. So let's go look for noise again. And let's go and check out some of these black and white spots. I'll go and look at these up close. That's kind of feeling a little bit like the grout. Let's see what it looks like here. So it's not too bad. I think one of the things I'm not liking is that I don't like tonally what I'm seeing here. That gray, even though it's darker, is reading as lighter next to this color. And so I'm going to go and just pull this down a little bit further. We'll zoom out of that. Really, really close to that color. Let's make sure we're looking at this one while editing this one. Actually, that's not bad there. Ended up switching which value was which, but that's not too bad. It looks okay there. And now what we need is to blend this together with the color of the tiles. So I'll add another blend. We'll pull our color of the grout in. You can see it's actually made brown tiles now. And now what we need is something to separate the tile from the grout, which was that other node that we made from the tile generator. So I go and plug this in. You can see that it's not doing what we wanted. And so we need to invert the order of our colors in order to make sure that we are putting grout where grout goes and we are putting tile where tile color goes. And that is now currently our color area. It's not too bad. I think the gap between the bricks is a little bit too big. I'm generating this noise that I'm using inside of here, inside of the, in this blend for the grout, where I'm getting dark and light grout, but the grout is actually perfectly clean. And so I may want to, inside of where my height map is here, I'm going to grab my levels and add another blend. And I'm going to take the noise that I'm using from the grout and blend it in like so that it actually is blending with that. Now I'm going to need to actually add a blend to this because I need to blend only where the grout is. And put this in here so that it doesn't add it to the tiles. It only adds it to the other area. Now it looks like I'm actually not using the right node here for this. So I'm going to pull this one in. There we go. So that it removes my tiles from that. So that's a little bit better. The bad news here is that it's not using the right blending mode in here. And so I'm going to set this to a copy? No, I think what I want to do is actually just plug this in here. And what I need is a way of separating the grout. Maybe I don't even need this at all. Maybe I just need my grout going directly in here, but I use the image to swap them. So again, this looks like it's doing the right thing. It's just the wrong order again. So we'll swap the order. And I should now get that grout in that area. If I go look at that height map again, we are getting a little bit of a problem here in that the highlight on the grout, it makes the grout look like it's as far out as the bricks, which doesn't look good. So I need to darken that grout. So we'll use a levels. And we'll add this to that chain. Move this forward a little bit. And in the levels, we're going to take the output white and drop it down to push those grout bits further back. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to increase the white values to push the bricks out further. Again, just so we get that really nice gap. Now it looks like the grout is wet. And that's because, again, currently what's going into our roughness is just a uniform color. So now might be a good time to start working on the roughness so that we can get this to read the way we want it to. To do the roughness, I'm just going to blend a couple of, I kind of like what I'm doing with the colors here, and just taking two variations of tone, again, imperfections in the process of creating these things, and blending them together. So maybe I'll do that down here for the roughness as well. So we're going to go and grab something, let's see, noisy. Let's use some of these grunges here. I'm going to pull in two grunge maps, grunge map 13 and grunge map 14, which kind of look like these streaky patterns here. And then I'm also going to go and grab another one. Let's grab 7. 7 is also nice and grungy and swipey. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a blend on these things to blend them together. So we'll put 7 as A, and 14 as B, and 13 as the gap between them. So one of the reasons I like doing this is that instead of just using a procedural, I'm now using a procedural to drive the variation between two procedurals. So that gives me something that's going to be a little bit more unique in the way that this thing blends together. And I can go and play around with different blending modes here too to get me variations in what this is going to look like. This is going to end up being my roughness here. And again, I want to kind of pay attention to what I'm doing. Black is going to be super shiny and white is going to be completely rough. So no matter what I do, I'm going to want a levels, and I'm going to plug this in here so that I can start playing with the shine level on these objects. So if I go into my levels now, I can start doing things like the black where it's crazy shiny. I don't want to be super black, and I definitely don't want the white to be super rough. I want this to be pretty subtle in terms of just giving me a little bit of information on these things. I don't want them to look crazy dirty and foggy or anything like that, but just enough information that they actually read as having, you know, some kind of grime and dirt on them kind of thing. Okay, so I've got a little bit of a roughness variation going. I also need to make sure the grout is rough. So here I'm going to take my my mask that splits the two of these things. I'm going to create a blend. I'm going to use the mask to swap the blend, and now I just need to create a roughness for that. So I'm going to take the grout tile image here again, and I'm going to drop it down here, and we'll create a levels here, and the levels will plug it into here. So again, I want to get the order correct. This should go into A, this should go into B. And now with this, I should be able to play around with how rough that grout is. So the grout should be more rough than anything else. But it would be nice to have a little bit of variation in there. Maybe what I'll do is leave that centered like that. That's not too bad. I think the spacing here, like I said, is a little big. So I'm going to go back into my original tile generator. And I'm going to find that interstice that I'm using, which is in size. And I'm going to bring this down. I've got 0.5 and 0.8. And so I'm just going to lower this one a little bit. There's 0.1. Looks like 0.1 and 0.05. I think that's what I've got. 0.02, 0.05. Now, I do need to put that in all of these things. So that was that one. You can see kind of why this is a pain in the butt. 0.02, 0.05. When you have a lot of these nodes that are all driving different aspects, you need to kind of adjust each and every one of them independently. This one too, 0.02, 0.05. And I think that's it for tile generators. So that should give me slightly smaller grout here, which I think is going to read a little bit closer. I need to put those little imperfection bumps in the surface. I don't have those yet either. So while I'm here with black and white spots, let's see, let's grab dirt. Try dirt 1. Ooh, dirt 1 is nice. Dirt 1 is nice. Let's throw a levels on dirt 1. And let's see if we can't increase the dark values so that we get little tiny bumps everywhere. Lovely. And then I'm going to need to blend these into my tile here. So this is right when it goes into the tile generator. So that's a really good place to put this. I'm just going to back all of these things up here so I have room for it. And put it up here. So I'm going to take this blend and I'm going to add another blend. And I'll put this into the blend. And we can use the opacity to knock this down. Until again, it's just slightly changing the surface value here. It's just slightly imperfect. If I go look at these bumps, they're probably a little bit too crystal clear here too. So maybe what I'll do is I'll add a blur. We'll go soften them a little bit. So we use a high scale or a high quality grayscale blur. And I'll just turn this intensity down. We'll turn the quality up. And we'll just turn the intensity down until those little tiny bumps are just that, little tiny bumps. There, something like that. Okay. That's most of the way there. I think what I'm going to do now, you can see we haven't done anything in our metallic value. And that's because, again, there's no need. There's no metal in the tiles and the grout of this subway station. So I don't have to worry about that. I think the ambient occlusion is darkening the grout too much. And so I'm going to bring that depth down again, that weight depth down again, until it's far more subtle. I'm just looking at the image and trying to get it as close as I can to kind of the colors I see there. Okay, so I'm not doing too bad here. I think it might be nice to make a couple of cracks in some of these things. Maybe I'm going to wear down this subway station a little bit. So let's go in and grab cells. And I'm going to grab, let's see, is it cells 3? Let's go take a look at this one. Ah, yeah, look at cells 3. So cells 3 gives you this kind of cracking effect. That's kind of cool. I'm also going to grab a slope blur, grayscale. And we're going to slope blur that image. And I need a value. Let's go look for our grunges here again. I need some kind of a black and white value to throw into the slope. So I'll put this in. And we'll go take a look at this here. I'm going to use the blur. That one looks too noisy for me. Let's go look for clouds. I want something a little bit softer in the slope. Let's go grab this. Okay, yeah, and turn the samples up. I'm going to bring the intensity down. And there, now we're getting somewhere. So it's just starting to kind of blend some of these cracks out on me. Let's take the scale of this and make it larger. Maybe something like that. Okay. Samples is up all the way. I'm going to bring the intensity up here a little bit too. And we're going to take this guy, scale, sorter, hardness, I'll bring up. Oh, there we go. There we go. So we're starting to get some really nice kind of chips going on here. Bring that intensity down a little bit more. But I still like to have that crack in there. In fact, it might be nice to just blend this with itself. We take a blend here and put this one in as a multiply. We'll start getting cracks that actually have some chips along them. Okay, so there's my cracks. If I go and add this to our height, I'm going to go and create a blend here at the end of this. And we'll take our cracks and we'll go move them up there. And put them up here. Trying to keep them out of the way of everything else. So if I go and put these in, you can kind of see the effect that it's going to give me. It's going to go and chip a lot of these tiles, which is really kind of cool. However, I don't want to just break the wall like this. This now doesn't look good at all. What I need to do is I need to kind of pick and choose where that's going to happen. So what I can do is I can duplicate my tile generator here. So there's my default tile generator. I'm going to duplicate this one over here. And what I'm going to do instead of doing that is let's grab our default brick here again before it gets blended in any way. And what I'm going to do with this one is instead of using in color the luminous random, I'm going to use the mask random. And this will actually give me a random amount of tiles to crack. So if I go and plug this into the cracking node now, it's going to limit the cracks to only just a couple of these tiles. So there, that one's cracked that way, that one's cracked that way, that one's cracked that way, that one's cracked that way. And again, this is going to look really good here in terms of being able to change this. And again, I can bring it up so that maybe only one is cracked, or, you know, there's 3 kind of thing. It's going to randomize this all over the place. So that's not too bad. I would like to make the crack look a little bit better. So now that I have that crack here, I'm going to need to also duplicate this. And let's go and put this into the color. So I need the generator. It's this one I don't need. And here what we're going to do is we're going to blend that color with this color. So again, that is not going to work. I need to generate color from this. So we're going to add a gradient here. And we'll throw the gradient in as that color. That should work. And we'll put this one into the base color. So not bad. It is kind of doing what it's supposed to here. It's adding black to that, which is beneficial, but it's not what I want. I don't want copy here. Let's do a add linear. No, it's not doing add linear. We'll do a subtract. I don't like the subtract. It is giving me a black tile. Let's add the darken. Oh, there we go. Now we're getting into something. Now, if I go into my gradient map, I can actually go and play around with what color I'm going to get in here. So I can go into the gradient editor here, and maybe we'll just go and use this color here. I'm going to pick gradient, and we'll just swirl around in here for a little bit. And then I'll just go and make some lighter changes in here, like so. So that should give me a little bit of a lighter effect in here now. Where's my cracks? We're using darken. I want to use lighten now. No, I don't like that. Let's use the overlay. The switch. Okay. We're getting there. It still looks a little overly bright in that color. I'll pull that down a little bit. Okay, so I'm now starting to get some white values in there. And what I'd like to do is actually add that to the roughness as well. So now that I've got these cracks here, I'm going to take my crack value, which is this guy here, and we're going to create an invert grayscale so that I get white, which is what I want for the roughness. I'm going to blend this with this guy. So we're going to create another blend. And we're going to blend these two together. So A and B. This is just going to be an add, so that it adds the cracks. And then I want another blend to blend it with this node using our mask. Again, make sure I get the order correct, like so. That actually should give me some rough values inside of those cracks a little bit. And so, yeah, I'm starting to get a little spaghetti noodly here in terms of where these nodes are going and coming. It might be in my best interest to go and start doing things like grabbing some of these nodes, right-clicking and adding a comment, like so, or grabbing one of these nodes, rather, and going and adding a frame. And I can call this, if I go and select the frame, I can go and name it over here. We'll call this Grout Color. And we can just take that frame and move it up a little bit. And I can do the same thing here. This is Tile Color, add a frame. And we'll take this and move them both up and kind of out of the way. So they're not impeding with anything else. And so this is kind of a nice way of making sure that everything is really nice and organized. So this is Tile Color, and so on. Now, you'll notice at one point here, I went and changed the interstice value between these tiles, making it smaller. And how much of a pain in the butt it was to have to go into each and every tile generator, hoping, you know, at some point I didn't miss one of them. And one of the things that you can do with this is you can actually start making variables here in your material to kind of take that area away from you, so you don't have to really worry about it too much. So as I mentioned, if you double click on the background, you can get the parameters of your material, and you can see in inputs right now, it's empty. There's nothing in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and generate some inputs. The tile generator is probably the easiest place to do this because it's the place where I know I have a bunch of these nodes and would be really worthwhile setting up some kind of variable. So I'm going to start with this tile generator. And let's add the X amount and Y amount as variables. So I'm going to go find the X amount. This is in the instance parameters here. This is the number of tiles by the number of tiles. So I've got 6 by 10 right now. I'm going to go into this drop down and I'm going to go and create this. Expose as a new graph input. When I do that, it's going to give me the properties here for that new input. So it's called X amount, and I can write this tiles horizontal, and I can put that into the label here as well. Amount of patterns in the x-axis, that's a good definition. We've got our default value, which is using whatever it currently is now, and then we've got our minimum and our maximum. I'm going to say OK. And now you'll notice in that tile generator node, the X amount doesn't have a slider anymore. I can't change it. And if I double click on the background to get to my material properties, I now have a tiles horizontal integer 1 that gives me a slider that I can go and move to change that number. I'll do the same thing with the tiles Y. We'll create a new value again, and this is tiles vertical, which I'll copy and paste into the label. And we'll leave everything else as default here now. And now both of those values are blue, so I can't change them. And if I go into my inputs, I now have tiles horizontal and tiles vertical. That is cool on its own, but again, the ability to go into every other tile generator, if I go into my X amount for this tile generator, I can use the drop down and now choose tiles horizontal. This one will be vertical. If I go into this one, tiles horizontal, tiles vertical. I'll go into this one, and I'm just going to go and visit each one of these things, subbing out the values that are there for now my input variables, which are going to drive what this material looks like. So I think that might be all of them. I'm looking for more tile generators. I don't see. We got one. I'm just going to go and select them here to make sure that they've all been taken care of. Well, and to check it, I can always just go into my variables here and play around with this. So if I go and play with the default value now and drop it down, we should actually see the entire thing move. It did not. You can see that something is skewed here still. There it is right there, tile generator. So I'm going to go in horizontal and vertical. And that should now line that one up. Looks like something is still off. So there may be, this one. There's yet another one of these. It's odd. I wonder why he did that instead of this. We don't need that one. I had an extra generator in there. Okay. So now that works. I actually have the ability of changing. You can see there's now 5 tiles across. So if I go into my material here and I go to vertical, I can go and take that 10 and bring this down to 5, and we'll actually get square tiles. In this particular instance, out of just pure happenstance, the cracks are not appearing. We're not actually getting any of that randomization in there. I could go and put that here as a variable as well. So if I go down to where my I've got my tile generator, and I'm going to go to my mask, my random mask, and I'm going to go and make this a variable, and we'll call it cracks. Copy it, paste it in here, and say OK. And then again, if I go into my material, I now have a cracks node that I can play with. Apparently I called it color somewhere. Cracks. There we go. So now I can actually go and play around with this variable that'll give me more or less cracks in this thing. So variables like this are really, really, really cool. Now, if you were to make this a material that you can bring inside of Painter, those little variables that you get, those input nodes, are what you're going to have access to in Painter in order to be able to go and modify this. Now, another really good one to put in is the random float. So any of these noise generators here, in them, you're going to see there's a disorder. This is actually animating the material over time. This is actually not a random seed in any way. This is actually just animating. But the one up here, random seed, this is another really cool one. Now, if I go and pull this down, you'll see that we can't assign a new input to this. We can't expose this as an input the way we did the other ones. But I can actually make that. Watch this. We'll buck the system here. I'm going to create a uniform color. I'm just going to make it grayscale for now, and I'm going to expose that as an input, which I'll call random seed. Now, this random seed was originally made, we'll call this randomize the patterns. This was originally made to just control a black and white color, which I can even delete this node. That input is still going to be there, random seed, which means now I can go and select any of my inputs, and under random seed, we can go, oh, we should be able to go and assign it. Let's go see what value that has. That is a float 1, and what are we supposed to have in the random seed? Why did that not work? That is a float, color grayscale, slider, angle. I just want slider. Let's try that. That's odd. It doesn't seem to give it to me. Let's try that again. Let's grab just any other node here. We'll assign expose as an input graph. We'll call it random. Just go and paste this in here. We'll grab the dirt, the random seed, and there. Now random is available. So now I can delete this one. I'm going to go and delete the random seed one here too. I'm not sure why that one didn't work, but I've got the integer here working now, so I have a random seed. So we can take that, and anywhere where I'm using anything that is procedural, we can now go and plug that in. So clouds, we'll grab the random seed and plug that in. We'll go to the black and white spots, and we'll plug that in. Now, this is going to make it so that all of them use the same random seed, but I'm okay with that. It is still randomizing what this thing does and how this thing looks. My cells, random seed, and these guys, all of these guys can get random seed as well. This one, this one, this one. And now what I've done is I've set up a bunch of randomization for how this node is going to work. That one, there. I think that's everything. So if I go into my material now, if we go look at this guy and what he looks like, I think even the tile generator here that's doing my mask, it's got a random seed as well that we can go and manipulate as well. So if I go into the random seed here and I pump that in, we'll see that crack move because it's randomized as well. So now if I go in here to my random seed and I start moving that default value, every single instance of this is going to be a different version of broken brick. And so I have a fair amount of customization over this that I can do. And all of this can now be exported. I can actually make 5 different variants of this thing and spit it out. And so, yeah, there you have it. There's kind of a start to finish building this thing. There's 2 things that you could do to save this here. The first, I probably should name this graph, right? We would go in and say rename. This is subway tiles. I could also do things like I could parameterize the colors, right? So I have Grout Color. Let's do that with the uniform color, okay? I'm going to make this, expose it as an input, and we'll call it tile color. And I'll just copy that and paste it in here, and paste it in here, and I'll say okay. And so that is now a variable. But watch this. I'm going to delete the darker color. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a node here called HSL, Hue Saturation Levels. And I can pull this in here, and we can use the hue saturation levels to darken this until it's about the same as this one and plug it in here. And we can delete this. So the reason you would want to do that is that now we have one variable that drives both colors. So if I go back in here, tile color, we can play around with whatever color tile we want. I can make it brown. Oh, we're going to have to go and fix that. We can go and make it fuchsia. And again, we're still getting the variation in color because the HSL is driving the other shade. And so it gives me a fair amount of control over how this thing is being driven. Again, I've got to go find how I'm blending this thing here because this is not correct. And I'm going to have to blend it the right way. Which is going to be, I think I gotta do it the way that I did the roughness, where I've got to blend it and blend it back in again. Because yeah, I'm doing a switch here, which is not going to work. Overlay, copy. Copy might work. It still looks overly bright. I think it's because I'm using a gradient map here. Whereas this just should be, we can go and pull these nodes off here. I think I just want this to be white. Like that, and then I can use the blend here to just use the cracks. And so wherever that went, it's like that one. No, that didn't do it the right way. But anyway, that'll give me the ability to make those tiles stay the right color. But yeah, there's something wrong with the way that I'm blending here. I need to get the right height map here, which is this. I think I just need a blend here. So I need to blend this crack with this node here as a multiply. And then I need to add that as this. There. So now it's just going to color that crack in the right way. So now if I go and change my color here, if I go to my uniform color, and I go play with this here, we should be able to get blue tiles and have them all work exactly the right way. And purple tiles, and they're all working the right way. You can see them actually blending with those two colors and giving me the effect that we're after. And I can do the same thing with the grout here. I could go and make the grout work exactly the same way. Give it a couple of variables and blend them together. So now that this is saved here, there's a couple of things that I could do. I could right click on this and we could, let's go to the unsafe package. We could go and export this to Substance Share. So Substance Share is a online repository. It is a collection of substances made by users that share freely with one another. So we could go and just export this as an SBSAR, which is going to be the material, and then an SBS as well, which we can do. So one of those, the way that those two nodes work, one of them is just giving people access to the material and to its inputs. And the other one gives them access to your entire graph. So you can actually let people go and manipulate your graph. The other thing that we could do is we could go to our subway tiles, right click, and export this out as bitmaps. This is going to create the output. It's going to create a bitmap for each one of the outputs. So we'll get a solid black metallic map, and then we'll get a base color that looks like this. We'll get a normal map that looks like this. We'll get a height map that looks like this, an ambient occlusion, and a roughness. And so it'll export each of those so they could be used in your favorite engine of choice, which is how you would go and put this together. You know, I would probably, if I were making a subway station and I wanted to do tiles like this, I would probably make 3 or 4 variants of this, which would give me the ability to go and, make sure that we have enough variation in here. Let's do 8 tiles by 12 tiles. Let's go see how that looks. Giving me the ability to, there we go. Oh yeah, that's lovely. Which would give me the ability to vertex paint these in Engine and be able to blend from one tiling material to another, which would definitely make this look a lot more, unique when you see it on a very large wall, instead of seeing the same pattern of cracking over and over and over again. So I would export it out as bitmaps, and then I would go to my inputs here, and I would go to the randomizer, and I would say, okay, now we're going to go do this one, and then I would export this one, and then maybe we're going to go over here to this one, and we can go and export that one. So we can actually get variations of this thing. in that way, so that I can actually play around with having multiple variants in the engine. And so, yeah, that's kind of how this works. That's the simplest of kind of tutorials here I can put together in terms of showing you a very easy and concise way of being able to build these materials. That crack doesn't look too bad. I think I might want to make that roughness a little bit more poignant in terms of what's being blended. But you get the idea. We're definitely at a point here where it is giving me a really nice ability to play with these things and get something that is going to give me, you know, the types of looks that I'm after. I'm just going to go make this white more prominent here. We're going to just ramp up the output white just so that those chips are not shiny at all inside, which will make them stand out a little bit more. And I could probably even go and darken them a little bit further here, or even lighten them a little bit further. So even this one here, we could go in with this and add a levels here too. So select that, add a levels, and again, ramp up that white color a little bit more to make it a little bit more visible. That's a copy. Yeah, so that's going to work quite well. And again, you kind of get that cracked tile here where we can see some of that inner color. It doesn't have to be pure white here. I can probably go and blend a different color in there, but you get the idea. We can use this this gradient map to do that. Pull that guy off. Go to the gradient editor. And where's my gradient pick? We'll just pick across here. And so, yeah, that'll give us the ability to get, you know, a little bit more interesting things going on in there. But that is a kind of look at this. This is how I would go and produce one of these things. This is how I would go and put this together to give me something that is reusable. It's something that, you know, if you spend enough time putting your parameters together and getting enough customization ability into this, where you know, with just a few little sliders, you can go and make more and more out of it. You know, looking back at that original material again, you know, I'm definitely at a point where it's starting to feel there. I could probably use a little bit of you know, honing in a little bit more. Again, I've got cracks and things on mine that don't exist in here. Just enabled to be able to show you that. But there's also, you know, there's some smaller dark blue tiles and there's some lighter blue tiles. There's the perfect square tiles in here and there. All of those could be made with this as well. Once you go in and you start kind of honing in on those values, you know, making perfect square is just going to be horizontal values that are equal to one another, and the blue is going to be just eyedroppering that blue. And so you can actually make something in terms of a material that is going to be pretty quick and easy to make multiple versions of this thing, as it were.